The black Mercedes pulled up slowly in front of the old mansion, its tires crunching against the gravel driveway that hadn't seen proper maintenance in years. Behind the wheel sat a man who had everything, or at least that's what everyone told him. At 42 years old, he owned 3 successful businesses, lived in a penthouse that overlooked the entire city, and wore watches that cost more than most people's cars. His name didn't matter as much as his reputation. In this city, when people talked about success, they talked about him. But success has a funny way of making people hungry for more. And that's exactly why he was here, at this abandoned estate on the edge of town. On a chilly October evening when the sun was already starting to dip below the horizon, the property had been on the market for months. Nobody wanted it. The place was falling apart, sure, but it sat on prime real estate, almost 4 acres, right in the path of the city's expansion. He'd done the math 100 times. Buy it cheap, tear it down, build luxury condos, and walk away with triple his investment, maybe more. His assistant sat in the passenger seat scrolling through her tablet. "The realtor's running late," she said without looking up. "Traffic on the bridge. She says maybe 15 minutes. He nodded, barely listening. His eyes were fixed on the mansion through the windshield. Even in its decay, you could see it had once been something special. 3 stories of red brick, tall windows that probably flooded the rooms with light back in the day, and a wraparound porch that sagged in places but still held a certain charm. The kind of place where rich families used to throw parties that made the society pages. "Want to wait in the car?" his assistant asked. "No," he said, already reaching for the door handle. "Let's take a look around, get a feel for it." The October air hit him as he stepped out, crisp and cool, carrying the smell of dead leaves and something else he couldn't quite place. Old wood, maybe, or just time itself. His contractor and architect climbed out of the SUV that had followed them, already pulling out measuring tools and cameras. The iron gate at the front of the property stood open, hanging crooked on rusty hinges. He walked through it, his expensive shoes clicking against the old stone pathway that led to the main entrance. Weeds had pushed through the cracks, and ivy crawled up the sides of the house like nature was slowly reclaiming what had been taken from it. That's when he saw her. A little girl, standing right by the front steps. She couldn't have been more than 9 or 10 years old, wearing a purple jacket that looked too thin for the weather and sneakers that had seen better days. Her hair was pulled back in 2 puffs, and her dark eyes were fixed on him with an intensity that made him stop in his tracks. "What the—" His assistant came up beside him. "Where did she come from?" The neighborhood around the estate wasn't great, but it wasn't terrible either. Working families, mostly. Some kids played in the streets sometimes. But this girl, she wasn't playing. She wasn't smiling or curious like kids usually were. She looked scared. More than scared, she looked desperate. "Sir," the girl said, her voice small but clear, "please, you can't go in there." He exchanged a glance with his assistant, who looked as confused as he felt. "Sweetie, where are your parents?" his assistant asked, putting on that friendly voice adults use with lost children. The girl didn't even look at her. Her eyes stayed locked on him. "Please, sir, don't open that door. Don't go inside that house." He felt a flash of irritation. He had a meeting scheduled, property to inspect, money to make. He didn't have time for whatever game this was. "Look, kid, we're here on business."
"Where do you live?"
"Does your mom know you're out here?" "You don't understand," the girl insisted, taking a step closer. Her small hands balled into fists at her sides. "There's a door inside. On the 3rd floor. It has a red handle. You can't open it. No matter what, you can't open that door." Now his contractor was walking over, clearly wondering what the holdup was. The girl saw him coming and her voice got more urgent. "Please, I'm not lying. They told me to warn you. The children told me. They said another one was coming. Someone who wanted to destroy the house, and I had to stop you." "Okay, that's enough," his assistant said, pulling out her phone. "I'm calling—" "No!" The girl suddenly grabbed his sleeve. Her hand was ice cold even through his expensive suit jacket. "Just listen to me, please, just this once, listen." He looked down at her, really looked at her, and something in her expression made his irritation fade. This wasn't a prank. This wasn't a game. This little girl was genuinely terrified. Tears were starting to form in the corners of her eyes, and she was trembling, not from the cold, but from fear. "What's your name?" he asked quietly. She hesitated. "That doesn't matter." What matters is that door, the one with the red handle, on the third floor. Promise me you won't open it. Promise me you'll leave this place alone. His contractor cleared his throat. Boss, should I call security or something? I don't know where this kid came from, but it's fine, he said, still watching the girl. She probably lives around here. Got scared of the old house, right? The girl shook her head violently. I'm not scared of the house. I'm scared for you. They said no one listens. They said people like you never listen. But I had to try. I had to. Who's they? His assistant asked, crouching down to the girl's level. Honey, who told you to come here? The children, the girl whispered. The ones who died here. They don't want it to happen again. They don't want anyone else to open that door. A chill ran down his spine that had nothing to do with the October air. His assistant stood up quickly, clearly unnerved. His contractor shifted his weight from foot to foot. Even his architect, who'd been taking pictures of the facade, had stopped and was watching the exchange. Okay, he said, trying to sound calm and reasonable. Listen to me. I appreciate the warning, but we're just here to look at the property. We're not going to hurt anything. And there's no such thing as ghosts or spirits or whatever you think is in there. It's just an old empty house. The girl's face crumpled. Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. You're just like the others. You don't believe me. You think I'm making it up? I didn't say that. Yes, you did. She was crying openly now, but her voice was strong. You think I'm just some stupid kid who watches too many scary movies. But I saw them. In my dreams. Every night for 2 weeks I've seen them. All those children crying, begging for someone to hear them. And they showed me you. Coming here. And they said I had to try to stop you. Something about the conviction in her voice made him uncomfortable. Not scared exactly, but unsettled. Look, I'm sure you believe what you're saying. Don't open that door, she said one more time, her voice breaking. Please, I'm begging you. Whatever you hear inside, whatever you think you need to do, don't open the door with the red handle. A car was pulling up, the realtor finally arriving. The girl saw it too. She looked at him one last time, her eyes pleading, then turned and ran, not toward the neighborhood but toward the side of the property, disappearing into the overgrown garden before anyone could stop her. Should we go after her? His contractor asked. No, he said after a moment. She'll be fine. Probably just neighborhood kids daring each other to come scare the businessmen looking at the haunted house. But even as he said it, he didn't quite believe it. There had been something too real, too raw about her fear. And the specificity of the warning, a door with a red handle on the third floor. That wasn't the kind of detail kids usually made up. The realtor was getting out of her car, waving apologetically. So sorry I'm late. Traffic was murder. Are we ready to take a look inside? He glanced back toward where the girl had disappeared. The garden was still and quiet. No sign of her purple jacket or her small, frightened face. Yeah, he said, turning back to the realtor. Let's see what we've got. As they walked toward the front door, his assistant leaned close. That was weird, right? I'm not the only one who thought that was weird. Kids, he said with a shrug he didn't quite feel. Probably lives around here and heard stories about the place. You know how rumors spread. But as the realtor unlocked the heavy front door and it swung open with a long, low creak, he couldn't shake the image of the girl's face, the desperation in her eyes, the way she'd said, "They told me to warn you," like it was the most important mission she'd ever been given. The entrance hall was impressive, even covered in dust and cobwebs. A grand staircase curved up to the second floor, its wooden banister still solid despite decades of neglect. Crown molding lined the ceiling, and he could see the ghost of where paintings had once hung on the walls. Built in 1947, the realtor was saying, her voice echoing in the empty space. Original hardwood floors throughout, though they'll need refinishing. The plumbing and electrical are obviously outdated, but the bones of the house are solid. Very solid. His architect was already making notes, and his contractor was testing the walls, knocking to check for rot or damage. He should have been focused on the same things, measuring, calculating, planning. But his mind kept drifting back to the girl. A door with a red handle. On the third floor. What's the history of this place? He asked the realtor as they moved from room to room. Who owned it? Oh, the Whitmore family, she said cheerfully. Very prominent in the community back in the day. Banking money, I think. They ran it as some kind of charitable home for a while in the 50s and 60s. Then it got sold a few times, eventually abandoned in the 80s. It's been sitting empty ever since. A home? Like an orphanage? Something like that. For underprivileged children, I believe the record said. Very generous of them, really. Though I suppose attitudes about charity were different back then. They climbed the stairs to the second floor. More empty rooms, more dust and decay, but also more potential. He could see it already. Gut the whole thing, keep the interesting architectural details, add modern amenities. Turn it into 8 luxury condos, maybe 10. The location alone would make them sell fast. The third floor is mostly servant quarters and storage, the realtor said as they approached another staircase. Smaller rooms, lower ceilings. Probably not as useful for your purposes, but you should see it anyway. His contractor stayed behind to examine some water damage, but he followed the realtor up. His assistant came too, still looking a bit rattled from the encounter with the girl. The third floor was darker than the others. The windows were smaller and the hallway was narrow. Doors lined both sides, all of them closed. The realtor tried the first one. Locked, most of them are up here. Previous owners must have sealed them off. They walked down the hallway, the realtor trying each door and finding them stuck or locked. At the very end of the hall there was one more door, and even from a distance, even in the dim light, he could see it. A red handle. Faded and dusty, but definitely red. His heart started beating faster. Coincidence, he told himself. Just coincidence. Old houses have all kinds of weird details. Someone probably painted it red decades ago for some practical reason he couldn't even imagine. Oh, good. This one opens, the realtor said, reaching for the handle. Wait, he said, the word coming out before he could stop it. She turned, surprised. What's wrong? What could he say? That a little girl had warned him not to open this specific door? That he'd been thinking about her desperate, tear-stained face for the past 20 minutes? That some irrational part of his brain was screaming at him to turn around and leave? Nothing, he said. Just, is it safe? Structurally, I mean. This part of the house looks like it's in worse shape. The realtor knocked on the door frame. Seems solid enough. But if you're concerned, we don't have to look. It's just storage anyway. No, he heard himself say. Let's see it. And even as the words left his mouth, even as the realtor smiled and reached for that red handle again, he thought of the girl standing at the gate. Thought of her voice cracking with emotion. Don't open that door. No matter what, you can't open that door. The handle turned with a click that seemed too loud in the quiet hallway. The door began to swing open, and everything, absolutely everything, was about to change. The door swung open, and for a moment nothing happened. Just a dark room, musty air rushing out to meet them, and the faint smell of old wood and dust. The realtor reached inside, fumbling for a light switch that probably hadn't worked in decades. No electricity up here, obviously, she said, pulling out her phone and turning on the flashlight. Let me just, oh. The beam of light swept across the room and he felt his assistant grab his arm. The room wasn't empty. Not at all, it was full of furniture. A small bed frame in the corner, stripped of its mattress but still intact. A wooden desk with drawers that hung half open. Shelves lined one wall, sagging under the weight of dust and time. And covering those shelves, dozens of small shoes. Children's shoes. Some looked handmade. Others were clearly old-fashioned styles from another era. All of them tiny. All of them worn. Well, that's unusual, the realtor said, her cheerful tone faltering slightly. Must have been one of the children's rooms when this place was a home. They probably just left everything when they closed down. But something felt wrong about it. The other rooms they'd seen were completely empty. Stripped bare. Why would this one room, behind a locked door at the end of a hallway, still have all these things? And why did the door have that red handle? He stepped inside, his architect's instincts taking over despite the uncomfortable feeling in his chest. The room was maybe 12 by 12 feet. One window covered in grime. The floorboards creaked under his weight, but they felt solid enough. His assistant stayed in the doorway, clearly not wanting to come in. Boss, maybe we should... She started. It's fine, he said, though his voice sounded strange even to his own ears. Just old furniture. Probably worth something to an antique dealer. He walked over to the desk and pulled open the top drawer. Papers inside yellowed with age. He picked one up carefully. It was a drawing done in crayon. A child's drawing of a house with a sun and some trees. In the corner, written in shaky handwriting, age 7, the next drawer had more drawings. More papers. A small notebook with a water-stained cover. He opened it, squinting in the dim light from the realtor's phone. The pages were filled with children's handwriting. Different styles, different names, different dates. All from the 1950s. This place really was a children's home, he murmured. That's what I said, the realtor replied, though she sounded less certain now. The Whitmore family ran it as a charity. Very respected, apparently. He flipped through more pages. Most of it was mundane. Drawings, practice handwriting, simple diary entries about daily life. Today we had oatmeal for breakfast. I don't like oatmeal. Played outside for 1 hour. It rained. Normal kid stuff. But then he turned to a page that made him stop. The handwriting was different here, messier, more desperate. They won't let us leave. I asked to see my aunt and they said no. They said I'm here to be helped, but I don't feel helped. I feel scared. His contractor's voice echoed up from the floor below. Boss, you need to see the foundation. We got a problem down here. He almost felt grateful for the interruption. Coming, he called back. He started to close the notebook, then hesitated. Some instinct made him slip it into his jacket pocket. The realtor was already heading back to the door, clearly ready to leave this uncomfortable room behind. As he turned to follow, something caught his eye. On the wall beside the door, barely visible in the shadows, someone had scratched something into the plaster. He leaned closer, using his phone's light to read it. Room 7, the red door, where they took the ones who asked too many questions. A chill ran down his spine that had nothing to do with the temperature. He stepped back, his heart suddenly racing. The girl's words came flooding back. Don't open that door. The children told me. They don't want it to happen again. You coming? The realtor called from the hallway. Yeah, he managed, backing out of the room, but he couldn't stop looking at those tiny shoes on the shelves. Couldn't stop thinking about that scratched message. Couldn't stop wondering what took meant. They spent the next hour going through the rest of the property. His contractor showed him the foundation issues. Nothing major, but it would add to the renovation costs. His architect took measurements and made sketches. The realtor pointed out features and answered questions about zoning and permits. He went through all the motions, nodding and asking the right questions, but his mind was elsewhere. It kept drifting back to that room. To the notebook in his pocket. To the little girl's desperate warning. By the time they wrapped up and headed back to their cars, the sun had fully set. The mansion looked different in the darkness, more imposing, more ominous. Shadows seemed deeper around the windows. The wind had picked up, making the old structure creak and groan. So, his assistant asked as they walked back to the Mercedes. What do you think? Foundation needs work, he said automatically. Plumbing's shot. We'd basically be saving the exterior and gutting everything else. But, he looked at her. But what? But you've got that face. That something's not right face. I've worked for you for 3 years. I know that face. He unlocked the car but didn't get in yet. Instead, he looked back at the mansion. The third-floor window, the one in that room, was barely visible from here. Just a dark square against darker brick. You ever hear any stories about this place? Before we came here today? She thought about it. Not really. I mean, I knew it was old and abandoned. Why? The realtor said it was a children's home. Run by the Whitmore family. Yeah, so? So why did they abandon it? Why did it get sold and resold and then just left to rot? His assistant shrugged. Lots of old buildings get abandoned. Economics change, neighborhoods change. Doesn't mean anything sinister. She was right, of course. She was usually right about these things. But he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. That little girl hadn't been making things up. She'd been genuinely terrified. And now he'd seen that room, read those words scratched into the wall. His phone rang, making him jump. His wife's name flashed on the screen. Hey, he answered. Yeah, just finishing up. I'll be home in 30 minutes. How'd it look? She asked. Good bones. Needs work. The usual. But you're going to buy it? He hesitated. 20 minutes ago, before he'd seen that room, he would have said yes without thinking. The numbers made sense. The location was perfect. It was exactly the kind of project he'd built his career on. But now, I need to do some more research, he said finally. After he hung up, his assistant gave him a curious look. Research? You never do more research. You see a property, you run the numbers, you make a decision. That's literally your whole thing. This one's different. Because of what that kid said, he didn't answer, just got in the car and started the engine. As they pulled away from the property, he looked in the rearview mirror. For just a second, he could have sworn he saw a small figure standing by the gate, A purple jacket barely visible in the darkness. But when he blinked, she was gone. Back at his penthouse that night, he couldn't sleep. His wife had already gone to bed and the city lights twinkled through the floor-to-ceiling windows. But he sat in his office, staring at his laptop screen. He'd pulled out the notebook from his pocket and set it on his desk. Just looking at it made him uncomfortable. Finally, around midnight, he opened his laptop and started searching. Whitmore Estate Children's Home History. The first few results were just real estate listings and local history sites with basic information. Built in 1947, owned by the Whitmore family. Used as a charitable home for underprivileged children from 1952 to 1968. Closed down and sold. Nothing unusual. He tried different search terms. Whitmore Estate Scandal. Whitmore Children's Home closed. Why? Whitmore Family Controversy. Most searches came up empty. But then on the fourth page of results, he found something. A scanned newspaper article from 1969. The headline read, "Former Children's Home Faces Questions After Records Surface." He clicked on it, his heart beating faster. The article was short, and the scan was blurry, but he could make out the key points. Apparently, some medical records had been discovered after the Whitmore estate closed. Records that showed unusual experimental treatments had been conducted on some of the children. The article mentioned an investigation, but it was vague about details. He searched for follow-up articles, but couldn't find any. It was like the story had just disappeared. Either it had been a false alarm or someone had made it go away. He opened the notebook and started reading more carefully. Most of the entries were innocent enough, but scattered throughout were hints of something darker. Had to take medicine again today. It made me sleep for a whole day. They took Jenny to the Red Room. She came back different. I want to go home, but they say I don't have a home anymore. One entry, dated September 1956, made him pause. There are 47 of us here now. Mrs. Whitmore says we're lucky. She says we're getting special treatment that other children would never get. But Tommy disappeared last week and nobody will tell us where he went. They just took his bed away like he was never here. 47 children. He sat back in his chair feeling sick. What kind of special treatment were they getting? And why did children keep disappearing? His phone buzzed. A text from his contractor. Ran the numbers on that foundation. Gonna cost more than we thought. Still want to move forward? He stared at the message for a long time. This was the moment. He could back out now, find another property, move on to the next deal. Or he could push forward, buy the place, tear it down, build something new. Bury whatever secrets it held under concrete and steel and luxury finishes. The smart business decision was obvious. The property was undervalued because of its condition. The location was prime. Even with the foundation costs, he'd make money. Probably a lot of money. But that little girl's face kept flashing in his mind. Her desperate plea. Don't open that door. He'd opened it anyway. And now he knew there was something wrong with that place. Something that had happened there. Something that had been covered up or forgotten. He picked up the notebook again, flipping to the last entry. The handwriting was shaky, clearly written by someone very young or very scared. It was dated January 12, 1958. They're coming for me tonight. I heard them talking. I'm going to the Red Room. I don't want to go to the Red Room. If anyone finds this, please tell my mama what happened to me. Please tell her I tried to be good. My name is... The entry ended there unfinished, like whoever was writing it had been interrupted. He felt cold all over. This wasn't just an old building with a sad history. This was something worse. Something that deserved to be known, not buried. He pulled up his contractor's message and started typing a response, then stopped. What was he going to say? That he couldn't buy the property because a ghost story had spooked him? That a little girl's warning and an old notebook had changed his mind about a multi-million-dollar deal? His reputation was built on being tough, decisive, unshakable. If word got out that he'd backed away from a project because of some mysterious feelings and a child's plea, he'd be laughed out of every boardroom in the city. But as he sat there in his expensive office, looking out at the city he'd conquered with his business savvy, he realized something. That little girl hadn't cared about his reputation. She hadn't cared about his money or his success. She just cared about stopping him from making a mistake. From being like all the others. What others? How many people had bought that property over the years, planning to develop it only to abandon it again? And why? He needed answers. Real answers. Not just newspaper articles and old notebooks, but the truth about what had happened at Whitmore Estate. He glanced at the clock. 12:47 a.m. Too late to call anyone, too early to do anything productive. But sleep felt impossible. His mind was racing, connecting dots, seeing patterns in things that might just be coincidence. Tomorrow, he decided. Tomorrow he'd dig deeper. He'd find out what really happened at that children's home. He'd figure out why that room had a red door, why those shoes were still on the shelves, why that message was scratched into the wall. And then he'd decide what to do about the property. But even as he made that decision, even as he closed the notebook and turned off his laptop, he couldn't shake the feeling that he'd already crossed a line. The moment he'd turned that red handle and opened that door, something had changed. He just didn't know what yet. Outside his window, the city sparkled with 1,000 lights. But in his mind, all he could see was darkness. The darkness of that room at the end of the hall. The darkness of secrets buried for decades. The darkness of questions that nobody had bothered to ask. He thought about the little girl one more time before finally heading to bed. Wondered where she was, who she was, how she'd known about that door. Wondered if she was safe, and wondered with a chill that went straight to his bones if she'd try to warn him again, or if next time the warning would come from something or someone else entirely. The next morning, he woke up with a splitting headache and a sense of dread he couldn't shake. His wife was already in the kitchen making coffee when he stumbled in looking like he hadn't slept at all. Which, truthfully, he hadn't. Maybe 2 hours tops, and those were filled with dreams of dark hallways and children's voices calling out for help. "You look terrible," she said, handing him a mug. "What time did you finally come to bed?" "Late." He took a long sip, hoping the caffeine would clear his head. "I was doing research on that property." And I'm not sure about it anymore." She raised an eyebrow. In 15 years of marriage, she'd seen him back out of maybe 2 deals. He wasn't the type to get cold feet. What changed? How could he explain it? The little girl's warning? The room full of tiny shoes? The notebook with its disturbing entries? She'd think he was losing it. Hell, he was starting to think he was losing it. The foundation issues are worse than I thought. Might not be worth the investment. She studied his face for a moment, clearly not buying it, but she didn't push. Well, you know best. You always do, but that was just it. He didn't know. For the first time in his career, he genuinely had no idea what the right move was. After his wife left for work, he sat at his kitchen table and made a list of what he knew for certain. The Whitmore estate had been a children's home. Something bad had happened there. Bad enough that it got shut down and the story mostly buried. There was a room with a red door that someone had marked as special or dangerous or both. And somehow a little girl in the present day knew about it. That last part bothered him the most. How did she know? Had she been inside? Did her family have some connection to the place? He pulled out his phone and called his assistant. "I need you to do something for me, quietly." "Okay," she said, sounding wary. "What kind of quietly are we talking about?" "I need information on the Whitmore estate. Not real estate information, history. Specifically about when it was a children's home. News articles, police reports, anything you can find." "You want me to hire a researcher?" "No, I want you to go to the public library. Check old newspaper archives, city records, whatever they have. And I don't want anyone knowing I'm looking into this." "Can you do that?" There was a pause. "Boss, what's going on? This isn't like you." "I know, just trust me on this one, please." "Okay," she said finally. "I'll see what I can find." He spent the rest of the morning trying to work, but he couldn't focus. Every time he looked at his computer screen, he saw that message scratched into the wall. Room 7, the red door, where they took the ones who asked too many questions. Around 11, his phone rang. His contractor. "Hey, so I've been thinking about that property. You know what's weird?" "What?" "I've been doing this for 20 years, right? And I've heard about the Whitmore estate the whole time. It's been on the market, off the market, on again. Different owners, different plans. But nothing ever happens with it. Like ever. Don't you think that's strange?" He did think it was strange. Very strange. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying maybe there's a reason nobody's been able to develop it. And maybe we should figure out what that reason is before we sink money into it." After they hung up, he sat staring at his phone. His contractor was right. Why had every previous attempt to develop the property failed? Bad luck, poor planning, or something else? He grabbed his car keys and headed out. He hadn't planned where he was going until he was already driving toward the old neighborhood where the Whitmore estate stood. In daylight, it looked less ominous but no less sad. A beautiful building left to decay, surrounded by a community that seemed to have forgotten it was even there. He parked down the street and just watched the house for a while. A few people walked by, a woman with a stroller and an old man walking a small dog, but none of them even glanced at the property. It was like it was invisible to them. Then he saw movement. Someone was at the gate. His heart jumped. Was it the little girl? But no, this was a woman, maybe in her 60s, with gray hair and a long coat. She stood at the gate exactly where the girl had stood yesterday, staring up at the house with an expression he couldn't quite read. Before he could second-guess himself, he got out of the car and walked over. "Excuse me," he called out. The woman turned, startled. Up close he could see she had kind eyes, but they were sad. Deeply sad. "Yes? I'm sorry to bother you. I'm thinking about buying this property. Do you know anything about it?" Her expression changed immediately. The kindness vanished, replaced by something colder. "You want to buy it? I'm considering it, yes. For what? To tear it down? Build something new?" Her voice had an edge to it now. "That was the plan," he admitted. She looked back at the house and he saw her hands tighten on the iron gate. "My mother died in that house. She was 8 years old." The words hit him like a physical blow. "I'm so sorry." "I didn't." 1957, the woman continued, her voice steady but strained. "They told my grandmother that it was pneumonia. Said she got sick and there was nothing they could do. But my grandmother never believed that. My mother was healthy when she went to that home. Strong. And 3 months later she was dead." He didn't know what to say. The notebook entries flashed through his mind. Children disappearing. The red room. Why was she there? At the home, I mean. My grandmother was a single mother working 2 jobs just to keep food on the table. Someone from the church told her about this wonderful place that would take care of children for free, give them education, medical care. It seemed like a blessing. The woman's voice cracked. "It was a curse. What happened there?" he asked quietly. She finally looked at him directly. "You really want to know? Or are you just asking to make yourself feel better about tearing it down?" "I want to know. I need to know." She studied his face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Walk with me." They moved away from the gate, heading down the sidewalk. The woman walked slowly, like each step took effort. The Whitmore family was very wealthy, very respected. They made their money in pharmaceuticals back in the 40s. When they opened that home, everyone thought they were being charitable, taking in poor children, mostly black and brown kids from struggling families, giving them a better life. "But that's not what they were doing," he said. "No." She shook her head. "They were experimenting on them, testing new drugs, new treatments. The children were guinea pigs and their parents had no idea. Most of the families were too poor or too powerless to ask questions. And the ones who did," she trailed off. "What happened to them? They were told their children had run away, or gotten sick, or been moved to another facility. Always an excuse. Always a reason why they couldn't see them anymore." She stopped walking and turned to face him. 47 children went into that home between 1952 and 1958. Only 32 came out alive. The number hit him hard. 47. The exact number mentioned in the notebook. "How do you know this?" "Because I spent 40 years of my life researching it, tracking down records, talking to survivors, finding the families of the ones who didn't survive. Nobody else cared. The Whitmores were too powerful, too connected. They shut down the home in 1958, claimed it was for restructuring, but it never reopened. The investigation went nowhere. The records were sealed or destroyed, and everyone just forgot. Except you. Except me." She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out an old photograph. "This is my mother. This was taken a week before she went to that home." He looked at the photo. A beautiful little girl with bright eyes and a shy smile, wearing a Sunday dress, standing next to what must have been her mother, the woman's grandmother. They looked happy. "She's in room 7, the woman said softly. "That's where I believe she died. They kept the sickest children there, the ones who reacted badly to whatever they were testing. The room with the red door." His blood ran cold. "How do you know about the red door?" "One of the survivors told me, years ago before she passed. She said they painted it red so the staff would know which room to avoid unless absolutely necessary. The room where they kept the failures, He felt sick, actually physically sick. He thought about standing in that room yesterday, looking at those tiny shoes, reading that scratched message. Children had suffered in that room, died in that room, and he'd been planning to tear it all down and pretend it never happened. I tried to buy the property myself, the woman said, back in 1995. I wanted to turn it into a memorial. But I didn't have enough money, and by the time I'd saved more, someone else had bought it. That's happened 4 times now. Someone buys it, plans to develop it, then backs out or goes bankrupt or something happens. The longest anyone's held on to it was 3 years. Why do they back out? She gave him a knowing look. You've been inside, haven't you? You've felt it. He wanted to deny it, to say he didn't believe in feelings or ghosts or any of that, but he couldn't. Yes. Then you know. That house doesn't want to be torn down. Not until someone tells the truth about what happened there. Not until those children get justice. They walked back toward his car in silence. When they reached it, the woman touched his arm gently. I don't know what your plans are, and I'm not going to tell you what to do. But I will say this, if you buy that property, you take on a responsibility. Those children deserve to be remembered. They deserve to have their story told. What if I can't? He asked. Why, what if nobody cares? Someone cares, she said. Someone always cares. You just have to find them. After she left, he sat in his car for a long time, staring at the house. The 3rd-floor window was visible from here, dark and empty. But now when he looked at it, he didn't see a renovation project or a profit margin. He saw room 7. The red door. 15 children who never made it home. His phone buzzed. A text from his assistant. Found something. You need to see this. Where are you? He texted back his location, and 20 minutes later her car pulled up. She got out carrying a folder stuffed with papers and looking pale. You're not going to believe this, she said, sliding into his passenger seat. Actually, maybe you will. I don't even know anymore. She opened the folder and pulled out photocopies of old newspaper articles, some barely readable. I found these in the archives. Most of them are from small community papers that don't exist anymore. The major newspapers barely covered the story. The first article was from 1958. Children's home closes amid questions. The second, from a few months later, Whitmore family denies wrongdoing. The third made his hands shake. 5 former home workers refused to testify. There was supposed to be an investigation, his assistant said. Multiple investigations, actually. But they all got shut down. The Whitmore family had connections everywhere. Police department, city government, even the state attorney's office. Every time someone tried to dig deeper, the case got buried. What about the children who survived? Didn't they talk? Some tried. But who's going to believe a poor kid from a bad neighborhood over one of the richest families in the state, especially back then? She pulled out another document. This is a list I found in the city records. Names of children who were registered at the home. There are 47 names on it. He took the list with trembling hands. 47 names. 47 lives. Some with notes next to them. Returned to family 1955. Transferred 1957. Deceased 1956. Too many had that last notation. There's something else, his assistant said quietly. I found adoption records. After the home closed, 12 children were listed as adopted. But I can't find any follow-up records for any of them. No school enrollment, no medical records, nothing. It's like they just vanished. He felt cold all over. What are you saying? I'm saying I don't think they were really adopted. I think that was just another cover story. They sat in silence for a moment. Then his assistant asked the question he'd been avoiding. So what are you going to do? He looked at the folder, at the list of names, at the house standing before them like a tombstone. He thought about the little girl's desperate warning, about the woman whose mother died in room 7, about all the people who'd tried to develop this property and failed, as if the house itself was refusing to let its secrets stay buried. I'm going to tell their story, he said finally. I don't know how yet, but I'm going to make sure everyone knows what happened here. His assistant nodded slowly. That's going to cost you. In money, in reputation, in time. You know that, right? People are going to think you've lost your mind. I know. And you're doing it anyway? He looked at the 3rd-floor window one more time. In his mind, he could see children's faces pressed against the glass, watching, waiting, hoping that finally, after all these years, someone would hear them. Yeah, he said. I'm doing it anyway. As they drove away, he didn't see the small figure watching from the side of the building. The girl in the purple jacket, tears streaming down her face again. But this time they weren't tears of fear, they were tears of hope. The phone call started 3 days after he made his decision. First, it was his biggest investor, canceling their meeting without explanation. Then his contractor called to say he was pulling out of the Whitmore project, something about bad optics and not wanting to be associated with controversy. By the end of the week, 2 of his business partners had requested emergency meetings to discuss his recent decisions. He sat in his office, watching his carefully built empire start to crack, and realized just how much this was going to cost him. His assistant had been right. People thought he'd lost his mind. "You're really going through with this?" His wife asked that night over dinner they weren't eating. "Even after everything that's happening?" "Especially after everything that's happening," he said. "Don't you see? This is exactly what happened before. Every time someone got close to the truth, pressure came from somewhere. Phone calls were made. Deals fell through. People backed off. But this was 60 years ago. The Whitmores are gone. The people who ran that home are probably all dead. Who's pressuring you now?" He'd been wondering the same thing. The Whitmore family fortune had been dissolved decades ago, split among various descendants who'd moved away and changed their names. There was no obvious villain pulling strings. And yet, within days of him digging into the story, his professional life was falling apart in ways that felt coordinated. "I don't know," he admitted, "but I'm not backing down." She reached across the table and took his hand. "I know you're not. You've never backed down from anything in your life. I just wish I understood why this matters so much to you." How could he explain it? The little girl's face. The list of 47 names. The room with tiny shoes and unfinished diary entries. The weight of knowing something terrible had happened and that everyone had chosen to forget. "Because someone has to care," he said finally. "Someone has to make sure they're not forgotten." His wife squeezed his hand. "Then I'm with you. Even if everyone else thinks you're crazy." That weekend he did something he never thought he'd do. He went back to the Whitmore estate alone at night, with nothing but a flashlight and the key the realtor had given him. He needed to see that room again, needed to understand what he was really fighting for. The house was different in the darkness. Every creak and groan seemed amplified. His flashlight beam cut through the dusty air, illuminating corners that seemed darker than they should be. He climbed the stairs slowly, his heart pounding not from exertion but from something else. Fear, maybe, or anticipation. The third-floor hallway was exactly as he remembered, narrow, dark, with that red-handled door at the very end. But this time he didn't hesitate. He walked straight to it and pushed it open. The room looked the same. The small bed frame, the desk, the shelves full of tiny shoes. But as he stood there in the silence, something felt different. He couldn't explain it, but it was like the room was waiting for something. For him to do something, say something, acknowledge something. He walked over to the desk and pulled out the drawer with the notebook. But this time he found something else underneath it. A folder, old and water-stained, stuffed with papers. His hand shook as he opened it. Medical records. Dozens of them. Each one documenting treatments given to children at the home. Names, dates, descriptions of drugs he'd never heard of. And at the bottom of each page, the same signature, Dr. R. Whitmore. He felt sick reading them. One child was given experimental seizure medication and had severe reactions. Another was subjected to corrective therapy for behavioral issues, therapy that sounded more like torture. A third document described a trial for a new sedative, noting that the patient did not wake after the final dose. These weren't medical records. They were evidence of crimes, evidence that had been hidden in this room for over 60 years. He took photos of every page with his phone, his hands shaking so badly he had to take some pictures twice. This was it. This was the proof that something terrible had happened here. Proof that couldn't be denied or explained away. As he put the folder back, he heard something. A sound so faint he almost thought he'd imagined it. Crying. A child crying, soft and distant, like it was coming from somewhere far away. He froze, his flashlight beam fixed on the wall. The crying continued, and now he could hear words mixed in with the sobs. "Help us, please, don't forget us." His rational mind told him it was the wind or the old house settling or his imagination running wild. But he knew better. He'd known since the moment that little girl had grabbed his sleeve and begged him not to open this door. Some things couldn't be explained by logic alone. "I won't forget you," he said out loud, his voice barely above a whisper. "I promise. I'm going to tell everyone what happened here." The crying stopped. The room fell completely silent, so silent he could hear his own heartbeat. And then, on the dusty surface of the desk, he saw something that made his blood run cold. Words were appearing, written by an invisible hand in the dust. "Thank you." He ran. Not from fear exactly, but from the overwhelming weight of what he'd just witnessed. He ran down the stairs, through the hallways, out the front door, and didn't stop until he was back in his car with the doors locked and his hands gripping the steering wheel. But even as his heart raced and his mind tried to rationalize what he'd seen, he felt something else, a sense of purpose stronger than anything he'd ever experienced in his business career. This wasn't about money or success or reputation anymore. This was about something bigger than himself. The next morning, he called a press conference. His PR team begged him not to. His lawyer strongly advised against it. His remaining business partners threatened to sue him. He did it anyway. The turnout was smaller than he'd hoped: a few local reporters, a blogger who covered historical mysteries, and, surprisingly, 3 elderly people who'd heard about the conference and came without being invited. He recognized one of them, the woman he'd met at the gate, whose mother had died in the home. He stood at the podium in a small conference room he'd rented, the folder of medical records in front of him, and told the story. All of it. The children's home, the experiments, the children who'd died or disappeared, the cover-up that had lasted for decades. He showed the medical records, read excerpts from the diary entries, and named names, including the Whitmore family and the officials who'd shut down the investigations. Most of the reporters looked skeptical. One of them asked if he had any proof beyond old papers that could be faked. Another asked what he stood to gain from making these accusations. "I don't gain anything," he said honestly. "I'm probably going to lose everything. My business relationships, my reputation, maybe my company. But 47 children died or disappeared in that home, and everyone chose to forget about them because it was easier than seeking justice. I can't do that. I won't do that." After the conference, as he was packing up his materials, the elderly woman approached him. Her eyes were wet with tears. "Thank you," she said simply. "For 67 years, I've been trying to get someone to listen. You're the first person with any power who actually cared." The other 2 elderly people came over as well. "I was there," one of them said, a man with white hair and shaking hands. "I was in that home from 1955 to 1957. I survived, but a lot of my friends didn't. I tried to tell people what happened, but nobody believed a kid from the poor side of town. Nobody cared." The third person, a woman with kind eyes, pulled out an old photograph. "This was my brother. He went to that home in 1956. They told my mother he ran away, but he would never have done that. He was only 6 years old. Where would he have gone?" Her voice cracked. "I've spent my whole life wondering what really happened to him." Standing there with these 3 people, hearing their stories, seeing their pain, he knew he'd made the right choice. Even if it cost him everything, but the cost was higher than he'd expected. By the following week, 3 more business partners had pulled out of projects. His bank called about concerns regarding his loans. Someone started a whisper campaign suggesting he was having a mental breakdown, his inbox filled with angry emails from people accusing him of trying to profit from tragedy, or making up stories for attention.